Welcome. Hello. Happy Monday to you. I hope all is well. Um, it's good seeing you. I started a few minutes late. I usually start at 9:30 Eastern time because I usually have a system, but I have a new machine and I can hear myself. Let me see if it sounds okay. Yeah, okay, so the mic sounds good. I'm going to go ahead and mute myself. But yeah, it's a new machine. I got a refurbished machine, and I'm noticing with the camera, I actually have the screen a lot tighter and in a lot more because if I blossom it out, it's really white. It's really bright. So I have a dark background plus the StreamYard background, and the camera's wider. It's a little wider. You can actually see a little bit of my acoustic foam, which was not the case before. So I have to remember that it is a wider camera, and I did check the specs. I should have expected as much. But what was I going to say? But it's the same size machine. It's just it's an updated machine. So just as an update, um, the the computer that I had been streaming on up until this point, up until tonight, was a 2010, and I got that back in 2015. So it's almost 13 years old. I still have to use it for a few more things, a few more composition projects, as I transfer things over. And this is a refurbished machine of 2017, mid 2017. So it should be faster. It's got a little bit more processing power, but it's also got a pretty fast, pretty noiseless hard drive. So hopefully everything is sounding good. It's sounding good on my end. And I'll just get used to the new, more closed in space like this. So, but fortunately, I can see the chat very well. So why don't we go ahead and welcome the chat, and we'll just have a very casual conversation on, why you shouldn't want to be famous or why you shouldn't want your art to be famous, at least in these times, at least in this decade, the decade of 2020. So let's go ahead and first welcome my one and only prof and channel member, first in your heart and first in the chat, as always, with my ring there. We've got Big Al Presents with some quotes. Fame is a beast that you can't control or be prepared for. This is by Tom Holland. And then also Lord Byron. Fame is the thirst of youth. I mean, honestly, I think in this day and age, I would say older people wouldn't want it as much, but I would say the entrepreneurial influencer, I think that's between ages 20 and 50. And then I think people are pretty content with where they are in life after 50 years old. We've got Go Team Ghost Planet Forever More 1.0. Good to see you. I hadn't seen you in a couple weeks, so I was wondering how you're doing. So good to see you there. And Ace is in the house. Ace, I totally forgot. I've just been so busy, but I know you emailed my Sound Engraver email. I will try to get back to your question. I think it was a listening question, so I'd have to take some time getting to that, but thank you for emailing. And I think we have any more. We've got Owen Lister. Welcome, Owen Lister. Yes, the camera probably should have more clarity. I mean, I think I'm still slow motion a little bit. Here's my woo. Yeah, so it's a desktop cam. It's not a webcam or anything, but it's just a newer machine. So yeah, again, it's got a wider angle, and I think I hope it looks good. I can't really see as I'm streaming. I mean, I could sort of see. Sound Engraver says Big Al, now available in widescreen. Yeah, widescreen's great. Yeah, it's kind of nice that you can see a little bit of my acoustic foam. So the wall in front of me is all acoustic foam, and then the wall to my side is all acoustic foam. And this is underground, so the sound should be fine. It's got carpet and everything. My black down comforter there should absorb a lot of the sound, so that's good. Oh, okay. There you go, Ace. You did send me an email. Go Team Go says that we've been busy with Thanksgiving and family and personal stuff. Well, there's never pressure to join the chat if you don't want to or you can't, but you are definitely missed when you can't join. So let's go ahead and talk about just a very casual kind of impromptu conversation about just, fame. Um, Not so much in the way of influencers and entrepreneurs. I'm actually talking about indie artists. So we're gonna just talk about more about our culture and the times we live in, and I think it'll be a pretty. It should be a pretty wholesome discussion, but we'll see where the talk leads us. So Owen brings up a point. Fame seems overrated these days. It's basically a drug, and the more you rely on it, the more addictive it gets and more destructive it is to your art and to your life. Yeah, well put. And I think that's a good segue into the actual discussion. So without further ado, let me just grab some water. I feel like I'm looking down just a little bit more onto the chat. Everything seems so closed in. So yeah, but I'm glad everything looks good and that everything sounds good. It's a good machine. I'm pretty excited. I spent like 4 days the last weekend and a couple days before the weekend just transferring files over, really throwing away files I didn't need anymore, and then just yeah, getting some of my software back up onto this machine. So I feel good. I feel good about it. So let's go ahead and talk about, why it's not really worth seeking fame these days. Now, just right off the bat, fame does have a little bit of luck and a little bit of position. If you have connections through your family, maybe you have family that's more affluent, maybe you have direct connections to places like corporations, major corporations, or Hollywood, based on your family or friends or different things like that. Fame really does depend on luck, but also, now in the YouTube sphere and also the online sphere, it does also depend on interest, the level of interest on your content. So with a little bit of luck, with a little bit of content creation, you're going to find yourself in a situation where you will establish a community of listeners and viewers. And really, since the 2010s, people really wanted to have their career in YouTube or something with online discourse, something that they can monetize and make an income off of content creation. And I would say to an extent that's a good goal to have. But the more I live and the more I observe things, I would say online content creation, unless you have absolute guarantee of viewership, it's not a viable source of income if you have other plans. Like, so if you wanted to produce a film, or if you wanted to produce something like a graphic novel, I would say it's probably best to just really establish a business outside the online square, or at the very least not have it be directly affiliated, like your income be directly affiliated with something like YouTube. Again, as I've said before, I don't plan on making money. Even though my channel is monetized, I don't plan on making income through YouTube. YouTube is a free platform I use for people to get to know me, to know my work, to know my work in music, to know my thoughts on art, things like science fiction, music, writing, different things like that. So it's really for people who might be interested in my music to get to know me, or if even just this community here who probably wouldn't listen to my music right off the bat would say, "Oh, okay, this is what she's about." So I like to think of it as just kind of a second website. I do have a main website, even though I have more traction on YouTube, but I use YouTube as more of a second website. I know a lot of people, especially in the last decade, really wanted to use YouTube as, well, this is my career. Some people can do it, but even people who were really successful between 2010 and 2020 are finding themselves not successful at all after 2020 with different historical events that are at work or were at work in the last few years. And I think a lot of people have realized that it hasn't been as viable. Now, I'm not really going to be talking about that. I'm actually going to be talking about just fame in general, and being famous really is not what, of course, it was back in the 1940s, 50s, 60s, or prior to that. You know, it's with Audrey Hepburn, for instance, gorgeous woman. I'm so glad that I found that picture to put on the thumbnail. In her time, ahead and okay, it stuttered for a second, but man, that was a fast stutter. I'm very happy with this machine. Going back to people like iconic figures like Audrey Hepburn, she, in her time, that was an optimal time for being famous. Cary Grant, that was an optimal time. Lucille Ball, yeah, of course they would have scandals, and there would be public speculation, and there would be public scrutiny and stuff like that, but not on the level as we see here. And so I wanted to talk about our culture, how culture treats famous people, how the people of corporations and Hollywood, how they would treat famous people, or famous art, really people's art, like famous IPs, like Star Trek and Lord of the Rings and all of that, and then also how society, like you and me, the everyday person, how we've been treating maybe not famous people, but pieces of art. I really want to actually talk about how fans are actually treating art. So let's actually get to the corporate side, the more corporate side first, and then we'll talk about more of the fandom side. So with the corporate side, I kind of wanted to touch on what Professor Geek was talking about with his tribute video to Kevin Conroy. I would safely say that Kevin Conroy is one of many people, one of many talented people, and ambitious people, passionate people who really put their all into their work. I think he's one of many people that have been, sidelined or put to the side, put on the shelf for a rainy day, so to speak. People who have been underutilized, or if not underutilized, I would say even downright abused. I think probably the most famous example that of recent history that we can talk about is someone like Stan Lee. There were reports of elderly abuse. In his elder days, he was just mistreated. I don't know if it was exclusively by companies like Marvel or Disney, but he was not treated the way he should have been treated. I mean, at least at the very least be treated decently for what he's brought to the world. He and Jack Kirby. I don't know Jack Kirby's story if he had one, but Stan Lee was very famous. Obviously he had his cameos with the Marvel films, very famous moments there. But a lot of people took advantage of him or took advantage of his presence. And then I would say, and I knew this at just days after his passing, that Marvel would never be the same. I wasn't even a Marvel fan at the time of Stan Lee's passing, but I knew it was just a matter of days and weeks before Disney and people over at Marvel Studios would really want to change the game. Now that Stan Lee had passed, like, okay, he's no longer go ahead and wait. Okay, there we go. He's no longer alive to contend with. I think people, yeah, we face a lot of backlash from fans anyway for doing terrible works. But we'd face probably a greater backlash. Maybe we'd face some legal ramifications with people who would speak on Stan Lee's behalf. Maybe even legalities would have to be placed in order. But now that he's gone, we can pretty much do whatever we want with Spider-Man. We can do pretty much whatever we want to do with Iron Man, and they have. They've shown their hand. They're very, very indecent to do that after the passing of someone. Back. I mean, even before. Like, I would say the early aughts, we still paid tribute to people. Thank goodness we still have paid tribute to people like Robin Williams. I don't think there's been any scandals or any backstabbing or bad publicity when it's come to Robin Williams. At the very least, from what I had heard as a spectator or someone who would watch the news, There were questions. People were asking, well, how did he die? I think the answer was he had unfortunately committed suicide, but there was nothing scathing. I mean, yeah, that's a tragic thing to happen, but there was nothing scathing. There was no defacing the legacy of Robin Williams. With creators now that we've seen with Stan Lee, and also now the recent passing of Kevin Conroy, immediately we have to be on guard as Professor Geek was warning his community, and you of course hear among that the people of that community, people are going to now really try to, with the passing of Kevin Conroy, they're going to try to up the ante with their reinterpreting Batman, and they're not going to have the heart of Batman, the mission of Batman, as Professor Geek has so wonderfully put in all his videos of the present and the past, who Batman is, and how Conroy seemed to get that, with his acting, with his vocal acting and his performance and all of that. I had grown up a little bit with the Batman animated series, even though I was not a DC fan as a kid. I knew who Batman was, and that's thanks to Kevin Conroy. But now there's going to be even more confusion now that we don't have Conroy as really the living tenant. People are going to push aside, and forget about his legacy. Maybe not the community, maybe not people like Professor Geek and Fan Man and Big Al, not with me either. We're always going to be watching things like the Batman animated series. We're always going to be hearing his voice as Batman. But I think the general population developing over the years, has really acquired for itself a very short attention span, and I would say memory loss. I think I would say, unfortunately, with the way people are going in the corporation and the corporate media, I think people are doing their best to water down something like Batman, or something like the iconic voice of Batman, the iconic Conroy voice, where it's all muddied. You're not really even sure who Batman is anymore. And that is a misaligning and a mistreatment of the actor Kevin Conroy. And I think people have this almost utilitarian, very shallow view of people's deaths, in recent history, where they're doing what they're doing with Marvel after the passing of Stan Lee, because, oh well, that's not going to affect him anymore. He's not around to see. But it's like, just because someone isn't physically around or living, the legacy is there. His ambition would still be there. His dream would still be there. His dream was to tell good stories. Obviously, he would want that to continue in his passing. But we're living in days of it being ephemeral. Like, everyone's going to die. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter how you die. It doesn't, everyone's going to go. You're going to live up, your fame and glory for your living, but there's no such thing as legacy. That's actually a real visceral idea that corporations and Hollywood has of people. They don't believe in legacy. They believe in fame and how you can take advantage of an IP or of an actor or writer, and then milk it until the cow can no longer give that milk. Very, very hot, malicious. I would say it's a very terrible thing to think, but the way people are acting and portraying different ideas and different stories, I would say it's kind of obvious that is happening. So really, it's unfortunate, but as soon as we hear of a passing of a legend, of an icon, especially dealing with storytelling, especially dealing with the IPs like Marvel and DC, we're going to see a change. It happened with the passing of Christopher Tolkien. Christopher Tolkien was the last living connection, obviously, to his father, but not just that. He watered and that was his garden. His father's works, after his father passed, after his mother passed, he watered and was like a gardener, like a steward of his father's works. As soon as he passed, now the Tolkien estate is like, we're gonna do whatever we want with Tolkien. His legacy doesn't matter. What matters is how we want to tell his stories and how we want to tell his characters. So it's a very vicious time to be famous or having to have been famous. You know, obviously Tolkien died a while ago, decades ago, but now his works are treated very viciously. You know, very it's just a misaligning of Tolkien's legacy, a misaligning of just what he had done. Same with Stan Lee and actors like Kevin Conroy. So now a little bit of a sidebar with Conroy. I hadn't heard that he sold his voice, you know, sold rights to his voice to different people. I'm so glad. I hope that didn't happen. Now, obviously, people can do they could do synthesized, you know, vocal synthesis, or they have software to make Batman sound like Kevin Conroy, no matter if it is the true interpretation of Batman, or the accurate representation of Batman. So yeah, they can find a way to use his voice, but they would have to be careful. I think they would run into legal problems if they tried to simulate like almost perfectly Kevin Conroy's voice. We did hear recently, I think as recent uh, as a couple months ago, I think James Earl Jones sold rights to his actual voice. I wish he didn't do that. I wish he didn't do that. You know, Darth Vader and Mufasa, they just need to be spared from the future atrocities that we're going to see in this decade. But anyway, going back to the corporation, you know, the corporate misalignment and treatment of famous people, it's just, this is not a decade to be famous, or this is not a decade to have been famous, because your work, your art is really going to if corporate hands had, you know, the tentacles of media and corporations, corporate media, I mean to say mainstream media, if they have their tentacles and their claws on your work of art, then it will be sullied. Like that, there's no saving it. I know that's kind of sounds like I would say it's not meant to sound like I'm despairing over it, but you know, from the little I've heard about things like Wakanda Forever and the treatment of death. Let me go ahead and just make sure everything's good. Just go ahead and say the word. I have a little bit of signal, but anyway, the computer is processing it very well. Yes. But you know, with just the brushing aside, you know, from what I had heard about how T'Challa's death was handled in the recent Wakanda Forever film, and also in connection with that, the actual actors passing, it's like, you know, weird. It's so weird how people are treating actual people's deaths, not just characters' deaths anymore, but actual passings of living icons. It's really crazy to think about. And so I think this time of milking the cow, like really milking the cash cow, as they're probably saying among the YouTube channels. I don't know. Maybe I just made that up. I'm not sure, but I think the milking of the cash cow and the IPs, I think that eventually will go away. I hope it goes away. I don't see it going away for another 10 to 20 years. I think it's going to be a long stretch. I think it's going to, unfortunately, just they're going to be, you know, carrying us through the mud and the drudgery of it. But I don't see it happening forever. You know, for the history of mankind, I do see an enlightenment, so to speak, an artistic enlightenment, an artistic renaissance. I actually do believe that corporations, like the major, like elite players and the corporations, I think as soon as they don't see an advantage to either get their propaganda out or make money, whatever comes first, as soon as they don't see the advantage, and or as soon as they see their job is done, I think they will move on to the next thing. I think their level of interest, I truly believe the general interest in Marvel stories has gone down like so hard. And I think actually there will be a general plummeting of interest even among the corporations. We got to be patient. And I would always encourage YouTubers, the major players, not to review. Like, don't watch the movie. Don't watch the movie. Just you could speculate, but don't watch the movie. I don't know if the YouTubers would ever listen to me on this channel, but it would really speed up the process. The corporations just leaving Marvel alone and DC alone, and vocal work of Kevin Conroy, maybe even vocal work of James Earl Jones. Man, I would say their interest would go down much further, much faster if the YouTubers just didn't pay attention to all the publicity stunts that they shell out every week, it seems. But that's the corporation side, where if the corporation has your IP, if the corporation has your art, you're in for a selling of your art. You're in for a misaligning of your legacy, and just really the act of deconstruction and destroying of a legacy. So in that respect, this is not the decade to be famous, or this is not the decade to have been famous. I think if you want fame, you're going to have to go to the year 2030, 2040, and maybe there will be brighter days for that. So that's the corporation side. Let me grab a swig of water. And then after I say the fandom side, we'll go back into the chat. Now, there's another side. So we've got the corporate side. Now we've got the fandom side. And I've talked a little bit about this, but there's always something new that I'm finding with the pop culture and the pop culture societies and the communities. And, we use the term fandom. And I'm seeing a behavior that is, among fans that might feel at first genuine. Let's go ahead and try that again. The fans might think they're fans. They might think they're sincere. They might think they're passionate, and maybe they are passionate, but they're not understanding the underlying trajectories of what is happening to IPs. I won't go into the specifics because I told myself I wouldn't rant about certain things. So I'm not going to rant about certain things, but certain things are happening, and I'll just generalize it because it's not just specific to an IP. I think it's just specific to pop culture in general. It's really not a good idea to be famous. Let's say you're a comic book artist or a graphic artist, or you're promoting a graphic novel. If you have a big audience and people are loyal to your work, that's all you could ever ask for. But I would not, in this political and artistic and cultural climate, I would not ask for a major studio to pick up your work, not for any money in the world. We talked about the corporate ramifications there, but the fandom is actually, I would say, misaligning and abusing, maybe unwittingly abusing certain IPs, certain works of art. What do I mean? Well, fandom concerning one IP, but again, this is general. Fandom, I know concerning one IP right now, one very famous IP right now. It rhymes with George Lucas. They actually are not seeing where this IP is headed, and they're being fans of something that is not. So remember, art is a representation of reality, and the quality of art is representing the integrity of a thing or the essence of a thing. And when that thing ceases to exist, it's no longer that thing. Maybe I should just use the example because it sounds confusing. I hope it to be a short rant. I promise, guys, I'm trying to be better resolution. But again, I just keep finding things to talk about. With the recent show Andor, with Star Wars, I'm seeing a behavior I had not seen before with previous shows, with previous Star Wars shows. And let's just say right off the bat, I have not seen Andor. I will never see Andor. I will never see what Disney produces. I just refuse to. Now people do say I can't be the judge. I can't be the adjudicator here. People are saying that Andor is good. It's high quality. But there is a very insidious thing underlying the content of Andor to where I would say it doesn't matter if Andor is an absolute masterpiece. It could be so good. The dialogue and the lines could be so good. It could be the best execution in the world. It could be the best moments. It could be cinematically historical. But if what I think is going on is happening, it actually doesn't matter. Here's where Andor is bringing a new light, a new thing to the table when it comes to something like Star Wars. And again, it actually will this will apply to any IP, any famous IP of this decade and going forward. Just beware. Just beware. Star Wars fans, in praising and complimenting Andor, they're actually starting to unlearn what they know about Star Wars, meaning this. They're actually not knowing what Star Wars is anymore because all their praises, or most, I would say, most of their praising Andor, most of their if the signal is spotty, just I would love to know because I keep blacking out. But going back to Andor, uh, most of the praise is, oh my goodness, this feels so good. I mean, it doesn't feel like Star Wars, but this is such good sci-fi. I mean, the world building, like these electric floors for the prisons, and wow, I didn't know the Empire was so evil. I didn't know the Empire was so ruthless. I didn't know the Empire tortured people, guys. It's like we what the Star Wars fandom is seeing and praising the show. Okay, so if I keep freezing, let me go ahead and just take off camera for a second. What I'm seeing with people loving the Andor show is that they're saying, well, you know what? This doesn't feel like Star Wars, but that's okay because every time Disney wants to feel like Star Wars with something like Kenobi or Book of Boba Fett, it's awful. So you know what? I actually dread Disney and Lucasfilm trying to feel like Star Wars. And um, I would say to that is now we're on a trajectory. Maybe Ahsoka, the Ahsoka series will feel like Star Wars. Maybe Thrawn will feel like Thrawn. I don't know. I'm not going to watch the show. But now people are like, there's a huge critical response of Andor that is absolutely positive. There's no denying it. Fans are loving Andor, but they're also trading in the actual feel of Star Wars. When I watch Professor Geek play Knights of the Old Republic, it feels like Star Wars. There's no question. The game has aged well. The music is great. The world building, the different scenes, the different planets. It feels good. It feels like authentic Star Wars. Fans of Disney Star Wars, especially with Andor, they're saying, guys, you know what? I'm okay with it not feeling like Star Wars. And they're saying that all over the map. They're saying it all across the board. That is cue. That is the cue for Lucasfilm to say, "Oh, okay. Okay. You do like this. Well, thank you. Now we're actually going to just use this Star Wars name and it's going to feel like it's going to feel like sci-fi, but it's going to be what we want. It's going to be the sci-fi we've always wanted. You know, Star Wars has always been campy. It's always been hokey. It's always been unrealistic with good versus evil. Now we've got a believable empire. Like when a Star Wars fan says, "I didn't understand how evil the empire was until I saw Andor," it's like, then you didn't use your imagination. You knew from the very first installment, from that very first episode, Star Wars with Princess Leia trying to send a distress signal and get to Alderaan. You knew the Empire was bad. You knew the Empire was evil. Tarkin was fine with about to execute Princess Leia. Now, would we have seen it? Probably not, because it was written for kids who wanted to aspire to be heroic like Han and Luke and Leia and stuff like that. We didn't need to see the nitty-gritty details. We didn't need to feel really, "Oh my gosh, I'm scared to death of the Empire." You had to use your imagination for that. Now, is that bad storytelling if you get it really tense and like, "Oh my gosh, the Empire's terrifying?" It's not bad storytelling. I would say that that could be objectively very good storytelling. But what's happening is Star Wars fans now are saying, "This is what we really do want. We actually don't want the prequel stuff anymore. We're fine with the Clone Wars and stuff like that, but not really. The prequels are cheesy. The originals are cheesy. We want the real visceral thing now." That was Andor. That was absolutely Andor. I'm not really sure why. I checked out the music. The music's okay, but it's not great electronic music, and I don't think Star Wars should have electronic music, but what do I know? I've talked about that. And so anyway, this is actually applicable to any IP or any famous thing where the fans now, after so much time and being disgruntled on good quality. Now, I've talked about wanting good quality. I've talked about needing good quality. But when you remove the essence of a thing, then it ceases to be that thing. That is the function of art, by the way. If you remove the quality, the essence of a thing, creditas, as James Joyce once said, if you remove the essence of a thing, it ceases to be that thing, no matter how good it is. So no matter how good Andor is going forward or any other Star Wars show going forward, just look out now for people saying, "It actually doesn't feel like Star Wars, but that's okay." So in the next 10 years, they might have good shows. Who knows? Like objectively good storytelling. But now they're erasing the integrity of a thing. Knights of the Old Republic, that feels like Star Wars. The original trilogy, that feels like Star Wars. Now, I haven't seen Andor, so I can't tell you for sure if it does feel like Star Wars or doesn't. But a lot of people who are loving it, like people who would otherwise criticize Disney, a lot of people are saying, "You know what? It doesn't feel like Star Wars, but that's okay." I actually preferred Lucasfilm for a while not do stories that feel like Star Wars. It's like, what? Then do a different franchise or make up your own franchise. You're there to make Star Wars. And Star Wars fans, Andor can be great, it can be A plus, but don't ask for that. They're gonna give it to you. They're gonna give it to you. You know, apart from Ahsoka and Thrawn and all of that, they're gonna start giving you shows that are possibly high quality in entertainment, but you've given them the okay to never produce a true Star Wars story ever again. So watch out for that. And the other thing too, also fans are settling. Could be with other IPs, but I've seen it with this particular context with Andor. Fans are also settling. Professor Geek called it a couple years ago. I called it a couple years ago. Fans are now settling. Fans are also settling for the existence of Snoke. They're apparently a character maybe has some sort of connection to this character we know to be with the sequel trilogy, which is Snoke. Now, I have seen comments and different people engage in discourse say, you know, out of a multitude of comments, people are saying maybe one or two people are saying no existence of Snoke, no connection to the sequel trilogy. Now people are fine with the existence of Snoke, meaning they're going to be fine with the existence of the sequel trilogy. They've spent so many years. How many years has it been now? Almost 5, maybe more than 5 years, just complaining and griping and pounding their fists and shaking their fists in the air, saying, "No sequel trilogy, we can't stand the sequel trilogy." And now with something like Andor, well, you know, Andor's objectively a good show. And if they can make the existence of Snoke believable, I guess I'm okay with that. I guess I'm okay with Snoke existing. So that's what's happening. So going back on the one hand, on one side, we've got the corporate media just totally misaligning the legacy of IPs and actors and writers and producers, creators in general. And then on the other side of it, we have fans settling for things that are they're supporting things that are no longer the original things that they were fans of. Now, people might say that's really far-fetched and way off base, but I would say just give it 4 to 5 years, maybe a total of 10 years. You're gonna start seeing a world that used to be Star Wars they're not gonna feel it's not gonna feel like Star Wars. It could be really good storytelling, but it's not gonna feel like Star Wars because they're, the elites of Lucasfilm and Disney and all those companies, they're embarrassed about the past. They're embarrassed by things what George Lucas did. And I know people say, "Well, George Lucas wasn't perfect as an artist." I'm like, "He had a big idea, okay? He brought to us Star Wars. At the very least, you can thank him for bringing us Star Wars." But that's what I want to say with the fans. The fans are now settling with things that they would outright oppose 5 years ago. That's what's happening. And so, as a creative, you actually don't want your IP or your creative art to be crazy famous with a crazy huge fan base because now fans are supporting the erasure of a thing, the erasure of the integrity and the essence of a thing. Little by little, they're chiseling away. Some of them, probably most of them, don't even realize they're chiseling away the essence of Star Wars. But they're settling for that. They're settling for that. And so 10 years from now, 15 years from now, Star Wars fans are not even going to know what the not sequel. They're not going to even know the original trilogy. They're not going to know people like Luke Skywalker or Han Solo. They're just not. They're just not. And that's Disney's plan, by the way. That's Disney's plan. That's their long game, their end game or whatever. So I'm going to get back to the chat, and then maybe I'll cap it off with what should artists do if they're not seeking fame? What should they seek? So we'll end the discussion there. But let's go ahead and talk to you guys. See what you guys are saying. Zootopia, welcome. Private Eye, welcome. And I think that was everyone new. So Ace says Jack Kirby's story is a sad story, but not as depressing as Bill. Is that Finger, the guy who really created Batman, that Bob Kane threw under the bus? I don't know that. You might, well, any good consultation of Batman's true character is Fan Man, but I should have said Professor Geek first. But I said Professor Geek first like 15 minutes ago. But I'll say because he's first in my heart. And I'm first in his heart. So the best consultant of the true iconic Batman is Professor Geek. And then I would say supplemental material should be Fan Man. Owen Lister says Hollywood has never really cared about voice actors as much as they did with on-screen actors. Yeah, vocal work takes an incredible amount of talent because you can convey your emotion with body language, how stiff you are, how tense you are. You can convey it just in your face without any words. But vocal actors have to rely only on words and the vocal nuance. And then they have to convey it through the facial features of the animated character. That's incredibly hard to do. I haven't done acting voiceovers, but I've done commercial voiceovers and being a narrator of a different things, and it's a lot of work. It's very strenuous. It's enjoyable, but it's very, very hard. It's rewarding work, but it is really hard. And I think also voice actors have that disadvantage that, like, I knew the name Kevin Conroy, but I really didn't know what he looked like. I only knew what his Batman looked like, and that can actually get to people. A lot of actors would prefer being on screen for that reason. Like, well, I want to be recognized. I want my face to be recognized as well as my voice. But it's probably better to be a vocal actor, a voice actor now these days. Excuse me. Oh, Jackson, I'm 100% in agreement with Professor Geek on pretty much everything. We're engaged, so no, he can totally say that the Joker shouldn't be supported. This might not be your channel. This might not be the channel for you. You're always welcome, but there, to again, we're talking about the erasure of the essence of a thing. If you erase the integrity of the Joker, the character, then you really shouldn't support that art, even if it's objectively a good film. If it's a see, art is a representation of reality. I am a huge proponent of good art, make no mistake, but art also functions as a so if the character like a Joker, the antithesis of Batman, it looks like I'm freezing up again. Let me just go ahead and put this. Uh-oh. Uh-oh. Man, I think my computer froze. Like, really froze. I can't seem to. Okay, well, I can't seem to click on my go. I might blink in and out, guys. Oh, my computer. Let's see what this looks like. Okay. Um, y- you know what? It kind of looks. How do you go ahead and just give me a word? 1 second. Ooh, hello, hello. All right. Well, that's interesting. I maybe I just have old connections, but yeah, my mouse went kind of haywire. Good. Looks everything looks good. 1 second. So, yeah, now we should be good. Thank you guys for sticking around. What were we talking about? We were talking about the Joker. So like the one problem that the prof had with the Joker film, with Joaquin Phoenix is that it told of a backstory when that wasn't the purpose of the Joker. That's not the story of the Joker. We're really not supposed to know who he is. Really, he is he's the force. He's the antithesis of Batman, and he can't be explained. And I think that's very important for Batman's character because Batman deduces, he's a detective, he tries to things he's what Fan Man calls, and I think it was Chuck was it Dixon? He calls Batman hyper sane. Batman is crazy sane to contend and to combat against not just the thugs of Joker or Scarecrow and stuff like that, the hallucinations and all of that. He can take on Joker when no one else can. And when you try to explain Joker, you've missed the point of Joker. That's the only way you should explain Joker is that he is Batman's antithesis, hardcore antithesis, and that's it. That is all Joker's function in the story. He doesn't need to be explained. And so when you're trying to draw up like a sympathetic backstory and get not only get down to feeling bad for Joker, and I'm a Christian. I truly believe in compassion and empathy, But what was happening with that film, Joker? Here's what was happening. Going back to the fandom, the fans' reaction of that movie, they were saying, "Oh, Joker didn't do this to himself. Society did this to himself." And people were saying, "No, no, no. We were just kind of in his head." But there was a very precarious whitewashing, if you will, with Joker's character, even though it's a traumatic depiction of a sorry individual, that's not Joker. Now, you can have a character like that, be inspired by Joker, but actually have a character like that, and even have him be an antithesis of some kind to Bruce Wayne and to the Wayne family, but it's not Joker. That was Prof's whole point. And so anyway, so yeah, I'm in 100% agreement with Prof as well. But thank you. Let's see. Yeah, I would say go team Ghost Planet. Christopher Tolkien has a family. Like there are Tolkiens, in the line of the Tolkien family tree, but they do not share Tolkien's mythology, his vision of his mythology. So yeah, it's getting wayward, and I don't trust the Tolkien estate with a 39.5-foot pole. I hope you guys can hear me. Private Eye says it doesn't feel like Star Wars when Star Wars is Star Wars. It doesn't need to feel like Star Wars. Well, I'm not sure what you mean by that. Let's see, like everything has an experience. Like every art piece has an experience. So yeah, it might sound superficial that Star Wars needs to feel like Star Wars. Yeah, it on the surface it is a very superficial thing to posit. But when something actually doesn't feel like Star Wars and it's called Star Wars, there's a problem. There's a problem with the experience. You're experiencing something that is not Star Wars. You're experiencing a different thing. So why have the name? Pretty soon, guys, Star Wars is gonna become the Black Mirror. You know, it's not gonna feel like Star Wars. And people say, "Oh, well, you're just being subjective about that." And I'm like, "Well, you can say that. Just give it time. Give it time. You're gonna see the logo. You're not gonna hear that iconic John Williams music anymore." I've made that claim now almost 3 years ago. You're just not. You when you watch the original trilogy in the opening, you do feel something, and it's almost universal. Like everyone has this kinda, like, tandem connection. Excuse me. It's like a daisy chain, it's like these electric wires. When you hear the opening music, that iconic John Williams Star Wars theme, the Luke Skywalker theme that I would call it, and then you see the yellow text and the scroll and the crawl or the crawl. Everyone has almost the same feeling if they truly love Star Wars. You you're not gonna have that 15 years from now. 10 to 15 years from now, you're not gonna have that. So that's what I mean by feel. Yeah, it's the word feel is a little superficial, but I think people may know what I'm talking about making this argument. The Old Republic era is a fan favorite. This is Final Fantasy fan 12. Welcome among the EU Star Wars fans. Um, okay, so Private Eye is pointing out, I think Retro Blasting, I think he's a YouTuber. I don't watch him, but I think he does toys or something. I've seen his his videos may have popped in my feed before, but he says, so retroblasting is saying that it's a loyalty to a logo, and that's probably true. It's like, well, I'm a fan of the logo. As long as Star Wars has its stamp, I'm fine. Owen Lister says, and this is a really good point, Star Wars Star Wars should not be realistic and gritty. There's plenty of sci-fi that fills the criteria, like Blade Runner or RoboCop. Yeah, and I think people say, "Well, you have an empire; it should feel gritty." But it's like there are ways to depict the evil of the empire without needing to be gritty. Not everything needs to be gritty. Things can be dark; they can have dark tones, but not everything needs to be gritty. Like there's an episode in the Clone Wars animated series with the clones and a fallen Jedi. It's crazy dark, it's crazy deep, but it was really well done. And but the it wasn't gritty, you know? Star Wars has explored very different themes that are very dark and very deep without making it gritty, and it takes talent. It takes actually ingenuity to come up with something like that that makes it feel like, oh wow, this is real stuff without it being realistic. Star Wars at its core has always been fantasy. Yeah. And I think actually, to your point, Owen, I think Disney is trying to make Star Wars a lot more sci-fi, which is weird because it has mystical elements too. It started with mysticism. It's always started with kind of a magic feel. Yeah, you have space travel, but the space travel isn't explained. You kind of just accept it, you know. There's radio communication between fighter ships and cruisers and stuff like that, but it's not like it is a lot more fantasy than it is. Yeah, besides the actual spaceships, it's not really sci-fi. Private Eye says, in Latin America, being a voice actor is a career as sought after as being a regular actor, mostly because of anime. We take voices seriously, really seriously. That's great. That's terrific. I think that's how it should be. Good night, Ace. I know you probably went away like a few minutes ago. All right. Dominic Powell, welcome. Adega Outlaw, welcome. Owen Lister says, Joker is a Lovecraftian demon. You don't know who he is or was, and that's what makes the character terrifying. Yeah, the most terrifying, and I think the world of Batman explores this theme: the unexplained, the unknown. That's what makes it terrifying. You know, the part of the terror of Arkham Asylum is you've got these doctors trying to find not just a cure for these really crazy, messed up people, but they're trying to find a logical reverse engineering to the source. What caused this this person to be maybe physically deformed, but definitely psychologically deformed? What every sane person asks, what has caused this? That's how we think. That's how we operate, and that's fine. We need to find things, but sometimes things are just unexplainable. Sometimes we can't explain. And what we can't explain or explore terrifies us. We're natural inquisitive beings. We are very inquisitive. We want to discover things. That's why that's why people are always for the progress of science, for not just technological advancement, but for the advancement to explore different worlds, whether on the molecular level or the orbital level or the space level, the deep space and all that. We're very much inquisitive creatures. We have almost, even if the unknown becomes known but terrifying, we would prefer that as human beings than leaving the unknown. We just get a lot more scared with the unknown and the unexplained. That's the intriguing thing about the Joker, and that's what makes him so terrifying. He can't be explained, and he wants to bring Batman down with him. He wants Batman to go insane. He wants to tell the world, like, as soon as he can break Batman and have Batman be like him in his psychosis, that level of psychosis, kind of like what he did with Harley Quinn. As soon as he can do that with Batman, he can show the world, I was right. This is all a madhouse. Because Batman does not relent. He does not give in. The world still can see the insanity of the Joker and be they're scared of the Joker, but eh, excuse me. His the inability to explain his past and explain his actions, that's the whole point of the character. That's why the movie may be a good cinematic piece, but it's not the Joker. If they did someone else that wasn't the Joker, Prof would have probably liked it, but it was the Joker. That's the whole problem. That's you can't explain the Joker. And Batman accepts that even as a detective. He accepts he can't explain the Joker. He just has to always stop what the Joker is about to do next. That's his whole mission. All right. Dominic says, as things are swinging back to the middle, will people remember there's such a thing as bad art again? Your last video got me back to thinking why some people think there's no objectivity in art. Yeah, I mean, well, first of all, thank you for watching my videos. I know my very topical art videos aren't as viewed, but it's actually one of my missions as an artist just to talk about it because I was a liberal arts major. I have 3 music degrees. And not only did I see very bad art in the college, I saw constant justification of bad art. And I had professors who would be objective and would say, okay, well, that sounds terrible. You shouldn't have composed it like that. Like, even if you had the most beautiful score, I was looking at old documents a couple nights ago. And the one thing that the universities taught me well with practice is I knew how to make very good looking scores, music scores. I don't know how to do that anymore. I guess I could show you guys some samples in the future, but there would be 1 or 2 professors that would come out to me and say, hey, this didn't work. This performance didn't work. Your composition didn't work. It sounded bad, and things like that. But on the whole, that was a rarity. A lot of professors and instructors and graduate students, they were fine with justifying bad. And it is unfortunate. And you're asking, as things are swinging back to the middle, will people remember there is such a thing as bad art again? Okay, here's the thing, and we're going back to the fandom, the current fandom. The corporation and the fandom. The corporation and the fandom, they have a kind of marriage going on. The people in Hollywood and Disney, Marvel Studios, Lucasfilm, everyone, they know exactly how the fans are reacting to every single project, every single episode of every single show. And they do exclusive interviews, for instance, to get the fans mad again. There's this really bitter, bad marriage kind of relationship between the corporation and the fandom. And the thing is, people do recognize bad art by the masses. Now, people are arguing, saying, no, the normies, the people, the everyday person who goes to their 9 to 5 shift and have their families, they're not getting that it's bad art. And it's true. A lot of people are, I have relatives who don't think certain shows are bad shows. And that's just the nature of it. But a lot of people, many people, millions of people know what the corporations are doing is absolute garbage. The reason why that's not mattering anymore to the corporations, and then also, to put it bluntly to me, is people keep going to the bad stuff. It's actually not a matter of good and bad anymore, as I thought it was 2 years ago, because people will go to the movie knowing it's gonna be bad, expecting it's gonna be bad, and then they're gonna be talking about it for another week on why it's bad. That's the problem. It's not actually the lack of recognition. It's not, "Oh, I can't recognize what's bad art." People actually do know what bad art is. They just keep immersing themselves in it. Now, they're not doing what the academics do. They're not justifying the bad art, but they are, I will say, they are justifying the existence of a bad piece of art by going to it and giving it the money and the view. As soon as you give them the view, they got you. They got you in their pocket. Not only do they have your money in the pocket, they've got you. And yeah, people just man, fans need to just stop watching this stuff. But I keep saying that, and my channel's not big enough for people to see that. Horizon Talker, welcome. It's been a while since I've seen you. Nice to have you back. But hopefully, Dominic, that answered some of your question. And man, I've done so many streams, so I can go on a tangent with this. One more thing to your point, you're saying your last video got me thinking back. So why some people think there's no objectivity in art? The reason for that is they don't want objectivity. They have a problem with standards. They have a problem with a compass. You know, what is good and what is bad, because it takes so much effort and merit to make a good piece of art. Even with music that I release, I always know it could be better. I always know I can be better as a composer. With the writing of some stories that I'm doing, I know it can always be better. And maybe it's good, but it can be better. And people don't want to hold themselves to those standards anymore. There's also a higher order of things. People, even atheists now, whether you're religious or not, people are submitting to a higher order of things, even if it's on the moral scale or morality. When they're seeing what is right and what is wrong, there are standards people need to hold themselves to. The reason why certain fans and people who cultishly, if that's a word, follow figures like Zack Snyder or Frank Miller is because they don't want an iconic, aspiring Superman and Batman to be like. They are not. Superman and Batman aren't aspiring. They are the ideal of the fictional heroes that people should aspire to be like and be like every day. You know, that's why we have these fictional characters. But now they want the Frank Miller murderous Batman and also just ugly Batman. I've seen his art. It's I'm not saying it like quality wise it's bad, but like it's ugly art. It really uglifies Batman. They're like, oh, we want that because that means Batman's like us. You know, we want Batman to be like us. We don't want Superman to be higher than us. We want him to be walking on the ground with us. It's like that's why. The same is true for the objectivity. If someone says, well, this isn't, it doesn't matter. Like there's no, all art is subjective. What they're saying is there are no standards. We can't hold the heteronormative side of things. It's like my art is my own expression and that's good enough. It's like, well, you might see it as that, but people around it might not take it as that. Why? Because we have standards of excellence. I say that phrase, standards of excellence, because that's actually I think it's federal, but it was definitely statewide criteria of music teachers, music educators. They had a criteria to uphold, adhere to for teaching. I never taught in the public school system, but I was music education major, almost getting her teaching certification. Never did, and I don't regret that. But we had this national criteria called standards of excellence, and I hold that true to be art. There are just things we know to be true, know to be right, know to be beautiful, know to be ugly. And a lot of people don't like that truth, just, you know, plain and simple. All right. Comic Skater, also welcome to you. Horizon Talker, yeah, let's see what you're saying. Haven't made one of these in a while, been in rehearsals for a Christmas show. Cool, like acting or narrating? Looking forward to watching the full thing later. Oh, well, thank you. There's a lot of probably stuttering because this is a new machine. I was hoping there would be no stuttering. Oh, you know what though? I have my Ethernet cable. I just realized I have my Ethernet cable plugged in, but I'm not on Ethernet. Oh, that's probably even though we're an hour in. One sec. Yeah, I think I was getting mixed signals. Whatever. This is a new machine. I'm just kind of experimenting. So, well, yeah, good to have you. Yeah, tell us what you're doing if you're still in, like what kind of performance that you're doing. Yeah, so Go Team Ghost Planet is also saying, Harley Quinn is also being subjected to reimaginings since the original actress retired, I think. Yeah, it's not even just a matter of the passing of an actor. It's just the actor discontinuing, just stopping to work because they want to retire. It's crazy. Dominic says, I enjoy your art videos. I'm an art major as well, but in my case, illustration. Well, that's probably much more economically savvy in your case. However, what bugs me sometimes is that teachers are hesitant in giving tough but fair critique to students. See, yeah, I'm a private music teacher, and I'm very hesitant to give constant praise. With compliments, if I do give compliments, I give one or two things that they have to improve. Because I've noticed with my students, in the 7 years that I've been teaching, 8 years I've been teaching, the students who, when I compliment them, I see their faces light up because I don't compliment them all the time. I'm especially with like 8-year-old girls, for instance. I'm very kind, very nurturing, and stuff like that. I'm not so nurturing, like obviously with an adult student. It's the dynamic. The expression, of course, is going to be different. The way I express in my teaching. But when I do praise them for something, they know it. That it's valuable to them because otherwise they're like, well, I know she's strict with me. I know she wants to push me in this area. And so a praise it's like currency. Like it's like they were just given some money, some cash, because like, whoa, well, if she said I did this right, then I did do this right. Because they kind of know that I wouldn't say it if it wasn't true. So for college professors not to give tough love, or I just say toughness, because they don't even need to give you tough love. That's really weird, especially if they have know-how. If they have know-how, it should almost be natural to give a kind of a tough criteria throughout this semester. This might be, I don't know, I could be wrong, but this might be an indicator that they might not know a lot, even as teachers in colleges. That's just my not 2 cents. I would just say that's just my speculation. Because if you know a lot in blacking out, if you know a lot, oh no, I stopped completely. Just I look okay now. Just go ahead and give me the word, but I'll talk with just the camera, or with my avatar. But I was saying if excuse me, I'm thinking about my computer. I'm saying if teachers do know a lot, then they just have this natural inclination to just be tough because they have so much to offer you. So anyway, well, thank you. This deserves a mention. Who are your major influences in music, Miss Engraver? Also, congratulations on yours and Professor Geek's engagement. Thank you. Yeah, I'm very happy lady. Hopefully all is good. Is everything good? I just want to double check. So just say the word, but I look okay now from my end. But who are my major influences? Man, this could be another stream. But we have time. I'm still under 90 minutes. My major influences for classical music is Bach, Tchaikovsky, Debussy, Satie, really the French composers. I should start with the Baroque period. Okay, let's do the Baroque period for classical music. Vivaldi, Corelli, uh, getting into Bach. We've got, of course, we've got to have Mozart. I would say some of Beethoven. I would say a little bit of Brahms. I know Brahms is so famous, but like he really, for his symphonies, he's great with melodies, but he's not good with transitions. Schumann, his Schumann symphonies is great. Tchaikovsky, can't go wrong with Tchaikovsky. Debussy, Satie, the more contemporary, like the 20th century composers. I would say, oh, video just stopped. Is my video okay now? I'll just go ahead and do this. Okay, so audio is fine. Oh, no. I'm just going to keep my avatar. But anyway, so let's see. What was I saying? So 20th century composers. I mean, there are a lot. I have to kind of think. Lachenmann, Morton Sabatnik, a little bit of Schoenberg, Stravinsky. Yeah. So those were the classical, like Western music. For electronic artists, I would pretty much say, here's actually, I'll just say what their records are, and then you can explore them. Altime. I think that's how you spell it. Altime. Okay. Altime Records. So Ias Dana, Martin Non-Static. You got Solar Fields. Solar Fields is great. I'm highly influenced by a lot of electronic artists. I mean, I can't really name. There are so many to name, but I just can't do it justice in the time frame that I have. But Ultimate Records is really a good go-to for more cerebral electronic that's also accessible. By accessible meaning it's good craftsmanship. It's very good. It's perfect for illustrating, I would say. It's great for storytelling and coming up with different worlds, and writing science fiction, for instance. That is the music that I turn to. For popular music, oh my gosh, I'm really not a popular music person. I would say Alison Krauss and the Union Station for bluegrass. Also, Infamous String Dusters and Punch Brothers for progressive bluegrass, a really good high quality composition. And then Dream Theater. And then, of course, my prof loves Van Halen and White Snake that you also listen to, and so many others. So many others. Anyway, but that could be another separate stream. All right, just a few more comments. Oh, I was going to also talk about what in the Dominic Powell also says Frank Miller's art wasn't always ugly. If anyone looked into what it looked like back then, it's a major difference to how it is now. Whew, the way you change is the way your art is going to change, for better or for worse. Let's just say that. Yeah. Interesting. Cool. All right. Owen Lister says, does electronic Beethoven exist? I mean, he didn't do electronic music, but there are people out there that actually have done synthesized versions of Beethoven's works. Yeah. Oh yeah, Alice Cooper. Yeah. Shout out to Alice Cooper. If you're listening, my fiance loves you, Alice Cooper. The Coop. All right. So, good. Well, hopefully audio looks great. Bach, Mozart, Beethoven, heavy hitters for musical influences. Great choices, yes. And people say, oh, Mozart's overrated. It's like, he wrote fantastic composition. It's okay if you go to a music school, if you go to a liberal arts school and a music department in a college, you'll find a student or two sitting in their little hallways, their little benches, saying, oh yeah, Mozart's overrated. No one listened to his contemporaries. It's because Mozart had patronage with things like people like the emperor and the church and stuff like that. And he had his father who wrote for the church, and sorry, that's just how it went back then. All right. Thank you. Well, this deserves a mention. You've got some very classy taste in music. My taste is rock and roll and metal from the 70s and 80s. And I do like instrumental metal, a little softer than the heavy metal, but I do appreciate some middle work music as well. Um, so let's go ahead and just cap off um, uh, this discussion, and I'll just leave it with my avatar here. With okay, so fame maybe not the best choice, at least in this decade. Give it 15 to 20 years, and maybe we'll be in a better artistic climate and a better media climate than we are today, with major corporate treatment of IPs. So I would say, if you really want to be famous with your art, if you want your art to be famous, I would just say, man, just let's wait, 15 to 20 years, and maybe things will be a little bit better. Things a little bit, I would say, a little bit more optimal. So there's that. So what's the alternative if not fame? What's the alternative? Well, a good artist, with, with some clout and intellect would say, well, I do want my stuff to be well known. And I think that's the adjective to use. I think that's the operative word to use: well known versus fame. Now people will say, well, what's the difference? Fame really means you are a household name. It means you're known everywhere. Like, I don't have to have seen any movie Angelina Jolie acted in to know who she is. Jennifer Aniston, J.K. Rowling, The Rock, for instance. I don't have to have seen any of those films to know who they are. That's fame. That's what being famous is. And it's not a bad thing to be famous, but just, again, in this climate now, it's probably, I would say, I would advise not to be, seeking that, having that be your ambition for this decade. So rather, what is more optimal now is to be well known. So what well known is it can be famous. It's like, oh yeah, The Rock is well known. Yeah, you can say something like that. But well known really is ascribing to an audience of your own. An audience tailored to your own art, an audience who not only would appreciate your art, but would appreciate your opinions and your input on that art. What we see now with famous IPs, and even actors and creatives for that matter, is that they're not, their opinions don't matter. And if you have the wrong opinion, if you dare have the wrong political or social opinion of something, then you're going to be actively canceled no matter how great your art is. We saw that with J.K. Rowling, so it does exist for sure. So rather than have that fame, seek to establish an audience, even a well-established business with your art, with listeners and viewers and readers. Establish your own personally tailored, that customized audience who really would love your work, who would love to read your books, love to read your comics, and listen to your music and all that, and have a side business or business to that extent, because people on a smaller scale would appreciate who you are as an individual if you are sincere, if you are good to people, if you are good to customers buying your product, and people will resonate with it. They'll understand, yeah, that's good. And I think that altogether is very, very wholesome. So even with Eric July, with his huge success in the independent comic world, he may come to the same level as Marvel and DC. At the very least, he's contending with those people. But even if it doesn't reach Stan Lee levels of fame, he definitely already has established his core audience. His now new readership supports him tremendously. And I think that's a very wholesome thing to see. I think even if you would never acquire that same historical fame, he is giving people what is very much necessary in the art world, in the entertainment world. And that's the most important thing to do right now, is just to give people the alternative. You don't like what Marvel is doing? Well, then check out the Rippaverse. You don't like what is happening with Tolkien and the Rings of Power? Well, maybe, I don't know, maybe someone like Shad Brooks from Shadiversity will do a huge, expansive, fantastical world. I think he's also entertaining this space opera, space fantasy world as well. So if you don't like what's happening with Star Wars, then he's in the future he's going to be providing an alternative, and that's the most important thing. That's absolutely the most important thing. So even if you have a small audience or a comparably small audience, like maybe you have a readership of 2,000 people, well, that's still a very wholesome experience. If you think about 2,000 people, well, what does that look like? Well, that looks like if you gave 2,000 people a comic every year, or maybe every 6 months. Let's do even shorter than that. I know that's a lot of work for such a short time. Well, that's actually, think about 2,000 people coming to your personal store. Maybe you have a little store, and 2,000 people entering your store and giving you business. Now, that might not be a lot to a store comparably, but the idea is, oh, I'm at least rewarding 2,000 people with a good piece of literature or a good story. So I would say the alternative for independent artists is to become well known as best as you can. Have your stories become well known. People like RJ from the Fourth Age. He's got his established YouTube base, and he's got some support with his short works and his graphic novel and all of that. And I think that's the way to go. Now, that those stories very well may pick up in a few decades and be as famous as something like Star Wars. But I don't think that's the goal. To be all honest, that wasn't George Lucas's goal either. He had an idea, he wanted to tell a story, and he took a lot of risks. He took a lot of risks to make that first movie. Space rated, sci-fi horror genre that people would watch with amusement, but not, he wanted something serious out of it, and he got something very serious out of it. In spite of what people would say now, like, oh, the OT, original trilogies, that's not serious. It is serious. It's very serious compared to the stuff that was being made, in that time. So that's the alternative. That's what I would end this discussion with is, be well known. So, try not to seek fame right now. Try not to be a household name right now. I think it's going to cause a lot of ruin, not just to the person, but to the legacy, to the IP. Rather, just have your own established audience and listeners and viewers and stuff like that. And then if many independent artists had that, then really the world is a better place because now we're exploring optionality. And that's the most important thing we can do to our culture right now. Even even I would say right up there with telling good stories of heroes and iconic figures, we need to give people optionality. That's what Eric July is doing. That's what Shad Brooks is doing. That's what RJ is doing. So I think that's very important, just to kind of keep that in mind. You might not be as well known as Stan Lee or Jack Kirby, or Chuck Dixon or those wonderful titans of the comics era, but it's still going to serve the world in a very good and wholesome way. So I wanted to end the discussion with that. Let's go ahead and continue with the chat before we sign off here. All right. Dominic says, I remember listening to electronic music growing up. Among other genres as a kid, the 80s was filled with electronic and synth. I don't listen to a majority of music we have today. Yeah, Ultimate Records, I would give it a go. It's very good working music. Like if you're writing a story or if you're writing a draft or an outline of a book, it's very good music for that. And then also people who collaborate with them. That's also it's a good place to start, especially if you're drawing though. If you're an illustrator, yeah, I would definitely give it a go. But and it's mostly instrumental, and any vocal stuff is more in the background, and it's unintelligible. It's supposed to be unintelligible, and I prefer that because when I listen to music with words, it actually does distract me a lot. So, all right. Owen Lister says, "I'd rather have a small audience who generally love my art instead of being famous and a sellout." Yeah, well put. So what you're saying, he says, Owen Lister says, is be a cult classic, something that's not as famous but still well known and talked about. I mean, I I, I wouldn't know. I wouldn't phrase it like that, but again, I'm not sure exactly what the meaning of cult classic. Because every time I think of cult classic, I think of like Fargo or The Big Lebowski or something like that. Um, it doesn't need to be your audience doesn't need to be like a separated audience with like a separated quirk or something like that, like a cult classic would have. But yeah, just I mean, I would just say more the numbers. I don't want to say fly low under the radar, um, because if your work is famous, then you of course can do the legal stuff to prevent it from being sullied. But anyway, I mean, that would be something just to establish your own personal audience is a good thing. Dominic says, "You two did a song talking about fame, its price, and not to let it consume you. It's called the Hold Me, Thrill Me, Kiss Me, and Kill Me as part of Batman Forever." Talking about also Kiss from a Rose by Seal. Um, it's a Kiss by a Rose. The lyrics is really strange. The lyrics are, sorry, grammatically correct. They're very strange, but the music composition is awesome. It's great. I know a lot of people don't care for Seal, and I can see that, but the music composition of well, no, there's a little part of that song that is absolutely annoying. It just doesn't fit at all, but the main melody is pretty cool too. All right. So, I think I'll end it there. Just for as long as my computer is like, oh, well, what is this StreamYard business? I'm a refurbished machine. I haven't done this streaming thing. I'm just practicing. um, but anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed that. I just want to just to recap, recapitulate my thoughts. Just that corporations and mainstream media and also fandom. I would say also the fandom too, in their different ways, have very much misaligned famous people and their famous works of art. And it's important just to promote the good art. I would not say promote art willy nilly. I know there's this huge independent artist movement happening with graphic novels and comics now. I would say be very careful, treat every piece of art with a grain of salt, because people are saying you got to support the indie artists. It's like, well, wait a second, I want to support, first of all, what I like, what my general interests are, and then I want to support it if it's good quality. I would never ask anyone to support my electronic music if they didn't listen to electronic music. And I still have a long way to go before I really want to compose in that style that I want. But I'm getting there. I'm getting there. But yeah, if you don't listen to electronic music, don't feel obliged to support me and listen to my music. So, but in any case, I would definitely not turn to the corporations, and I would definitely not turn to the fandom. I think the fandom are slowly settling for what these corporations have wanted all along, and I think the fandom has to be very careful with what they consume. They're they're more like being fans of being a fan than having that true love of a certain work of art. But that is where I will end. I so thank you for all the little technical hiccups, guys. I really do thank you for sticking with me. We'll see how this works with. I'm very curious to see the replay of how this machine handled the streaming. But thank you guys so much for tuning in. And you know what? Until I see you next, always keep producing, promoting, and preserving. I'm going to say that again. Produce, promote, and preserve the good art you love, and I will catch you later. Take care.